Okay, so let's go ahead and get started since we don't, it's a short session. So, hello everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Abraham. I'm head of customer and partner success for 4C Risk. And I wanted to welcome you today to our virtual fireside chat where we will be talking to Christine Horvega from CGI about how measuring and monitoring improves visibility into your InfoSec posture. The session is part of reinforcing regulatory compliance and cognitive technology. It's a speaker series that we're having right now. Since this is a short 30-minute session, we'll jump right in asking Christine a couple of questions. We hope that we'll have time to answer questions from the audience today. So please put questions into the chat menu and we'll go from there. I wanted to take a moment to introduce Christine. We're excited to have her as part of this speaker series. As director with CGI Federal Division, Cybersecurity Enterprise Programs and Emerging Technologies, she has over 20 years of experience successfully driving transformation through enterprise program development, implementation, and management. Throughout her career, she has partnered with government and commercial entities to enhance information, cyber risk, and security programs that focus on enterprise risk, technology, data policy, and compliance. Her technology enablement focus has been on governance, risk, and compliance, big data solutions. Welcome, Christine, and thank you for taking time to share your thoughts with us today.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. And it's really good to work together again and catch up. I had an opportunity to watch the last month's discussion, and it was a great segue, great information, because Jessica spoke about their survey results, which they had collected, and there's no surprise that cyber was number one. It is a key risk. And if you look at the World Economic Forum, cyber is in the top 3 year over year. Information security is so critical in maintaining the business environment, ensuring that your stakeholders and shareholders alike have confidence. Now, I work with government agencies today, but in my previous roles, I've supported commercial entities as well. And the risk is always the same when dealing with the confidence in the availability of services, confidentiality of information, especially personal information, and the focus on privacy, and integrity in transactions and operations that lead to the 2 others being true.
Thank you. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. So the first one would be, what are the key factors needed to evaluate an organization's InfoSec posture?
So I think there's a lot going on today with information security. So I really want to focus on 3 areas, and that's assets, users, and third parties related to risk and compliance. In my experience, implementing information security programs, whether it's risk, compliance, or both, the key to success relies heavily on assets. This is very comprehensive today with all the hardware, software, your digital products, end users, devices, and the list goes on as you get into the network. There's just so many actors within the network that are not known or trusted today. So it's really significant to think about those threats and vulnerabilities to each of the critical assets, but then your assets as a whole. And also with bring your own device. What are your users doing on those devices? What kind of security settings are on those devices? And so the operation inside of your environment and what you're trying to control for is very focused on assets today. The second is knowing those users that are operating in your environment. We have end users, so you have your employees, you have contractors, you have vendors. You know, with this mix, you're expanding those boundaries, which is amplified by the pandemic. It is now easier than ever to work from anywhere. I currently work from multiple locations and I'm always using multiple devices. You know, this creates new challenges from an information security program. There's been a big push towards zero trust, which addresses those devices' identity, workload, and data, and how you're going to secure them. I think the final is really going back to those vendors and the cloud managed services, your third parties. You've created this whole other environment with another actor. within your environment, in which you have to do risk management, you have to think about compliance, and how are you going to ensure that they meet your compliance requirements or your risk tolerance. And then also that shared controls and oversight that need to happen in the cloud instances. Those are areas that we really see, those three areas is what we really see as bringing visibility to your program.
Thank you for that. And with the explosion of the endpoints, how does this change the demand on InfoSec programs?
So I think it's what everyone's been saying, which is more people, better systems, and new indicators. We have, again, so much going on that in the beginning, it was more of a castle and moat, as they talk about, where you had your on-prem and you had your network, which you could secure. With all of these endpoints exploding out and really being able to work from different areas, but also different devices, what you see is that it's going to information security is going to move more towards an identity base, in which you have to identify everything, give it an identity, and then determine what's the behavior, what's the access, how should this be used, or how should the user be doing the work. This goes back to all aspects, not just the end user, but also the data and the networks. What you're seeing is that this is again, with the more people, it needs to be a shared workload. We're seeing a lot of level of effort just to keep up with how much is going on from a threat perspective. And then, the number of vulnerabilities in the database just grows exponentially. That's why the focus of CISA and DHS is really about, one, bringing together collaboratives in which they can collect information not only from the government sector, but also from the commercial sector, to bring a lot of these indicators in, so that there's key risk indicators as well as performance indicators for those organizations, whether they're agencies or commercial, and that sharing the level of effort is really allowing everyone to utilize their workforce to the maximum. And we're really seeing that it's not one organization can maintain everything anymore. So the InfoSec programs are vastly expanding. It needs to include everyone. It has to be a cultural change, and it has to be a tone from the top, in which everyone is a first line of security in the organization. Everyone is acting in the best interest of security and becomes part of that InfoSec program.
Thank you. So, how do you identify the right approach to maintain a resilient posture?
So in my experience in multiple years of not only implementing but developing these programs, you always go back to the three major components, which are people, process, and technology. And this is always going to be supported by your policy that provides management's expectations of performance. Architecture, regardless of your architecture, security, or operating, rely on the effectiveness of exchanges, policy, enablement of operating securely, regardless of that model that you pick. So it really goes back to, what are your key processes, who are your end users, and what should they be doing? And then what are your technologies that you're putting in place? And what we're seeing, and when we work together on the GRC initiatives, we really saw that there was this opportunity for a aggregate set of data. Today, that big data is just more and more, and we're seeing a lot with the hybrid cloud environments and with a lot of exchanges going on. Where's that reference point that you can go to today, and where can you really use that program to run a continuous data, keep that information fresh, and then look at how you can manage your InfoSec posture, but not only gain visibility, but then respond appropriately.
That's a great point. So, what tools and techniques do you use to measure and maintain?
So I would say that one of the things you're going to see with tools is that there are so many technologies out there. I'm not going to go through the list of them, but really through a measurement, you're going to have your vulnerability scanners, and you're going to look for those vulnerabilities and measurements. They've definitely done better at creating a risk-based approach behind those vulnerability metrics that are created today and how the solutions are handling them so that you can prioritize. The other way is, I always say, go back to the beginning, which is it has to align to your business objectives and also your organizational risk tolerance or appetite, depending on what you set. That really helps set those risk indicators and based on your operations and critical path processes. If you're measuring something that doesn't matter, then you're really putting your resources behind the wrong activities. So it goes back to, what are you aligning to? Is it in your business plans? What you fund often matters. And so thinking about your allocation of resources is really how you're going to better measure and maintain. I can say, though, that from a maintenance perspective, we again are seeing a lot of tools that are getting better using automation, monitoring those compliance baselines, and using machine readable languages like OSCAL, and NIST is really driving hard on that. This reduces that activity that your people need to do and that strain on your resources. And then compliance becomes more about security rather than checkboxes, because you're doing that continuous monitoring and you're out there looking for opportunities to improve those controls. And it reminds me of the GRC term, control once, satisfy many, that we started off with, because when you meet a lot of your business security objectives, you're going to address your compliance and your risk issues as well, and really cover down on those.
Thanks. So since you've been working both on, the government side and on the commercial side, can you tell me, do government entities have different concerns around InfoSec than public corporations?
I would say what we're seeing is no. Government and industry, as I was talking, through CISA, DHS, and NSA collaboratives, we're seeing that the combined effort is actually where everyone is seeing the same threats. A lot of state actors behind Log4j and SolarWinds. Everyone was impacted, whether it was the commercial side or government side. We're also, just today, I was reading an article on Defense Scoop, and the Pentagon and DoD are pushing towards how do we rapidly deploy commercial technologies, because that's where you're going to see improvements, you're going to see automation, and going back to where those constraints are with how do I ensure that all my resources are used effectively and efficiently, because there is so much going on in the environment, and then how can I bring it all together? It's really becoming a collaborative effort, and you really see government has all the same risks. They're using the same vulnerability exchanges as the commercial entities are, and also looking at the best responses. And that has to be a united front from an organizational perspective, whether government or commercial, is how do we respond to these threats so that ransomware cannot run rampant through the systems. And I think additionally, there's agencies, a lot of them are messaging today. They're moving away from the compliance checklists and towards the risk-based decision-making and taking that risk approach. So it's really about prioritization, continuous diagnostic and mitigations, and really understanding how you're monitoring and then managing and maintaining those controls.
Got it. So how do you see cognitive technologies like Forceva supporting information security?
So if you go back to the multiple points that I mentioned around continuous monitoring, consolidation and convergence of data, cognitive technologies like ForceRisk are enablers of these big data consolidations. They really allow you to put together some good models, enable opportunities to automate more activities that allow your resources to do more strategic and more evaluation and analysis versus just constantly spending more time churning on collecting the data, putting it together, trying to decipher, does it go in this, this category or that category? And I think what you're seeing with cognitive technologies is that they provide support for that behavior I was talking about. Whether it's data or your users, you're really looking for those changes in behavior or your operating environment, being able to trigger the organization if they need to change or respond, or again, be resilient because they've been, breached. These are things that are going to be much more effective if I have a cognitive technology that is able to set up models and tell me ahead of time, or do scenario-based planning for me, that what am I actually looking for, or what should I expect to see. And I think if you look at your MITRE models, MITRE attack models, where they're starting to show here's what we typically see in the actors, it's very similar here, where if you use a cognitive technology, you can start to identify where you have changes that aren't typical to your system, or you can start to see where a scenario may be played out, and you're able then to respond appropriately.
Thanks. Okay, so what are some of the emerging trends and or challenges that you see around the InfoSec or, and compliance programs?
So I'll kind of take this from a two-prong approach. I'm seeing a lot of technologies. We'll talk about it from a technology perspective. InfoSec, again, the field out there is very full of technologies and resources, managed services. What we're seeing is they're moving more towards a consolidated and converged platform. So it's not only about compliance, it's not only about security and privacy, but how do I manage all of those and multiple activities with one solution in order to maximize my resources. Because what I'm also seeing is that you really have that challenge of resources. It's not only about the workforce, it's, well, how skilled are they? Do they know all of the tools and technologies? Well, how many activities can they truly do? And then how many threats are out there? And what's that expansion of your workforce? So if you think about the digital footprint and the hybrid clouds and all of the activities that are going on today, compliance becomes so complex that from an information security posture, you really want to be able to maximize your resources. And so the challenges are making sure your workforce is not fatigued. And so I've heard this term many a times, which is technology fatigue, workforce fatigue, because you're operating 24/7 for security operations centers, or threats are coming out at all hours. You have exploits that are bringing down your systems. You have like a colonial pipeline. And so what I really see it as, it's kind of like, you put a fence around your yard, and you have this nice white picket fence and it looks great. But as you start to, it starts to wear down, you start to pull pieces off it. And what you're starting to see is that your fence starts to break down over time. It's similar to your organization. They have been constantly putting up that front. Your tools are coming out. They're constantly replacing those boards, replacing the fence. That activity gets tiresome. And so what we're seeing is fatigue. And I think from a challenge, we need to look at how we can maximize those tools as they start to unify more into one platform.
Thanks. So you speak about the continuous approach. What is the value of having ongoing visibility versus point in time?
So continuous is the act of always measuring and putting into context. When we talk about, where those threats are or what the operating environment is and vulnerabilities, what's those responses that you need to have ready or that you need to be prepared to do. So from a continuous, I think we're really talking about where can we be looking at the operating environment, where can we look in our technology, and where can we understand where we need to respond or where we need to stop doing an activity. Risk is tricky because you don't know what you don't know. And so as you think about all those risks out there that you're starting to manage, compliance is never going to cover everything. It's really just the baseline. So your info security program really needs to give you visibility to that. So from a continuous monitoring, or how do I automate looking at my solutions, looking at my network or my user behavior, what does that look like? It's going to enable me to see, again, those changes or potential discrepancies and be able to detect when an anomalous activity is happening. Then I can respond appropriately or recover. Again, sometimes we get hit with that exploit and we have to recover. So it's how do I respond to that? What am I going to need to be able to do? And that really brings in resiliency. And I think when you think about point in time, and all I ever think about is that, end of month, we run to the end of the month to do reporting. And I used to support a CFO group, and they would run to the end of the month. Everyone was downloading as much as they could, putting together the numbers, and you had all those notes at the bottom. Well, that's a point in time. Now you're already into the next month, and you're already trying to make the numbers for the next month. So well, I have all these notes, but what am I really able to do with that? And am I able to respond appropriately? And I don't see point in time being that effective, in that your response is delayed, and then you're becoming reactive to a lot. And with so much activity and so many threats and vulnerabilities going on, you don't have time to constantly fall behind one or two steps. You have to be able to keep up with at least the minimum. And that's the high ones.
So can you tell me how your organization, CGI, is approaching technology or cognitive technology for security?
So CGI, and I work with a cybersecurity group, we're actually looking at a lot of opportunities for data exchanges that are secure. So blockchain concepts, and then continuous authorization and automated risk management. If you think about continuous authorization or authority to operate, as we do in the government sector, as you bring on new technologies, new systems and solutions onto a network, the government looks for that authorization and accreditation of that system, saying that it is secure, you're meeting the minimum controls, you understand your risks. What we're doing is automating that and looking to make it a continuous approach in which you can leverage your automated technologies around cognitive, or as well as the continuous diagnostic and mitigation programs that we have going with 8 agencies today. What we do is we're looking to dashboard all the critical risks by putting, again, them in context. And that's where I think the continuous comes in, is once you understand the context in which you're operating, you have your critical assets or high value assets, you have those threats that are going directly after them, and then you understand the vulnerabilities to them, you can respond appropriately and really focus your resources versus trying to cover every asset across your network. And again, it really comes down to this idea of automating a lot of the activities of data collection and consolidation, putting them in categories. And we used to work a lot with taxonomies, understanding how those taxonomies then impact what you're doing, allows you to understand the visibility and those factors that are going to drive the change in your information security posture. And then, of course, you always have the converging security concept, which is, if you have compliance today, how can I think about security, compliance, risk, privacy all at the same time, and really think about building that into my processes so that I'm not doing a stage gate approach of security steps in at those stage gates to move on, but I'm really building it as an underlying factor, and security is really part of my core team.
Got it. Thank you. So I don't know if anyone has any questions from the audience, but if you do, please let us know. We'll be happy to ask Christine those questions. And thank you for answering the questions thus far, Christine. While we're waiting, I just wanted to say, it's clear from the discussion today that having the right tools and using the right techniques will allow, companies to focus on key parameters that align with their risk tolerance and their threshold, and ultimately ensure that their InfoSec program reflects the InfoSec posture best suited for their company. I think that's one thing you were talking about, Christine, about, you have to make sure that your program aligns with, the InfoSec posture, because everyone has a different tolerance that they're willing to, afford. Okay. So I think that we're almost done. So again, thank you, Christine, for sharing your time with us today. And to all the participants, we hope that the session was beneficial, and tremendous thanks for joining us. We'll share the link to the recording of the session as well as a summary transcript in the upcoming days. If you have any questions, please let us know. We also want to put a plug in for our next event, which will be September 1st. and we're thrilled to be discussing GRC chaos to order by using cognitive technology with our guest speaker, who will be Michael Rasmussen of GRC 2020. So we look forward to hearing from you in the future and assisting you in understanding how cognitive technology can strengthen your compliance program. So have a wonderful day or wonderful evening. We hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.